but staying on that life issue, and in fact sending off busloads of very enthusiastic young people, teachers, and priests, is my next guest right now. That's Nebraska Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations, protector of conscience rights, religious liberty, and moral law, and a congressman who just very recently gave an outstanding floor speech in the House on tolerance and telling his listeners in the House, his fellow congressmen, what true tolerance really means. Congressman, welcome back to the program. It's been too long.
Sheila, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for giving me a few moments. You know, I'm in a very unusual place. I am on a bus with about 50 young people from Pius High School, St. Cecilia's High School, sitting next to Sister Pia Marie and Sister Megan Therese and Father Kipper. How you doing?
That's
hey, you guys,
wonderful.
say hi to Shelia Liaugminas.
Hi, my friends. Sister
So
Pia,
Sheila
this is wonderful.
Yeah, Sheila is a national radio commentator. She works for Relevant Radio. We are on live national radio right now. And I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of notoriety because, again, as I told you earlier, what you're doing is so important for America. Sheila, we have about, what do we have here, Jeff? Hundreds of young people coming from Nebraska. 225 young people from Nebraska that are going to make a 24-hour or so bus ride to Washington, D.C. to exercise their fundamental American rights to civil discourse, to march, to provide redress to their government around one central issue, protecting innocent unborn life and the women who carry them. I'm so proud of these young people because they lift the minds and hearts of the country to what is noble and ideal. And while we in politics can debate all this, when young people come out and show this kind of love and courage, and they're acting as great Americans. Right, you guys? All right.
So Congressman Fortenberry, I hear that ebullient, exuberant crowd there. I hear the excitement. They're very on fire the way I've been there. I mean, I've stood in the middle, up there by the train station in Washington, where it's like the center of a wheel. So every avenue I looked down, I saw crowds and crowds and crowds of very excited young people coming in my direction. I thought, oh my gosh, they're so young and they are so joyful. What is motivating those young people by you to go do this, to go through a 24-hour bus ride to D.C.? What do they think will happen? Why? You know the answer to why we march? Why are they marching?
You know, Sheila, Kathy Sachere is right here with me, and I've watched her grow up as a child. I know her parents, and she's now a young adult, a high school student. Kathy, you want to give that answer to Sheila? Did you hear what she just said? Why are you doing this?
I want to be a voice for the voiceless.
You see that? I mean, we couldn't have practiced that. I just asked her, she was chewing some candy or something. I said, Kathy, and you want to answer that? So, as you saw, it's just a spontaneous outpouring of the heart from young people. And what's so beautiful about this is young people are not, we're living in a new generation in which they want to be inclusive. They want to exercise these ideals of tolerance for other people and justice for all, but they can't reconcile the contradiction, the paradox of justice for all except them, the little innocent unborn child. How can we do that as a nation? How can we live with this contradiction? And they can't. Mm-hmm. So their beautiful innocence is, again, lifting our minds and hearts to that which is good and noble and true with integrity. Let's protect all persons. Let's help all persons, no matter how tough the circumstances. And I think that's what's motivating these young people. Is that a pretty good answer, Kathy? What do you think?
Yes, sir.
Well, you all know that you have an excellent representative in Congressman Fortenberry. He's been on this program a lot over the years. I love having him on because he does talk about what's true, noble, good, what's so honorable about leadership, and he represents that in Washington. When people say, well, you know, we just don't have that anymore in D.C., I say, well, yes, we do, and I know some of them, and your leader there is one of them. But do you hear how proud he is of all of you? I want you all to know, so are we. Across America, we pro-lifers are very, very proud of you being there in D.C., showing the nation very young, very joyful faces, always marching down those streets in Washington, on the Mall of Washington with joy, chanting, banners, all of the above, the nuns you have with you, the priests you have with you, everyone doing that with great joy. I think you all believe Roe v. Wade is going to end. Abortion on demand is going to end, not only in your lifetime, but soon. What do you think?
Nick, this is Nick Faber. Nick wanted to say something to you, Sheila. What do you think, Nick?
I want
Hey,
to say
Nick.
that no matter how you dispute it, it's always going to be a life. That is a human life in the womb, and you can't get around that. I don't care how you look at it. That's a human life, and we need to protect that.
See, Sheila,
Nick,
you don't have to go to law school to understand what these kids understand.
see, Congressman, that's the point I wanted to make, and I wanted to ask them about that too. Why is it that a lot of adults just don't get this, and that they'll buy the lie, if you will? I mean, they'll buy the untruths that sows confusion, whereas little children and young adults and children throughout the ages through high school and, you know, when they go away to college, they get it. The younger the children are, the more they get it, and they kind of have to teach us, right? So, but they truly get what Nick just said, and those who say, I want to be a voice for the voiceless, they understand the voiceless is already present in the mother's womb. It's not just a blob of tissue that's going to grow into a human life. They already get it, like Nick just said. That's why we need you young people out there, being our faces, being there for those of us who can't be with you. We have a hashtag campaign, Fast for Life, here at Relevant Radio, and we're going to be putting that on social media. But we are praying with you and joining you and accompanying you all. So, Congressman, I know you're going to send them off, right?
Yeah, in fact, I think Jeff Shinstock, who's the local coordinator, is getting a little nervous. The sun's going down. It's kind of cold here in Nebraska. They need to get on the road. It might be getting a little icy. So I'm gonna step off the bus here momentarily. But you guys, thanks so much again for what you're doing. Thanks for having a little fun with Shelia Liaugminas, again, who's a national radio reporter for Relevant Radio, used to work for Time. And so she does a tremendous job of keeping, again, America aware of the most important issues, and I'm proud to call her friend and proud of her as a journalist. She's doing truly good and noble work. So say goodbye to Sheila, everybody, and Sheila, I'll step off the bus and be right back.
Bye. Safe travels, all of you. Godspeed. And we'll be praying for you. And Congressman, I'll be right back to talk to you next.
Thank you.
Reaching beyond the headlines to give you the real story. A closer look with Shelia Liaugminas.
On Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Welcome back to A Closer Look. I'm Shelia Liaugminas, just having a lot of fun with a busload of students, a couple of them actually, I think are there, a couple of busloads or more than a couple, but I was talking with a couple of students from one busload of students heading from Nebraska to D.C. for the March for Life with nuns and priests and teachers, and they're very exuberant and very, very joyful, and that's just what we get every year in the March for Life in D.C. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, however, remains with me. He sent them off. They have to get going now. Sun's going down. It's very cold there, and the bus drivers have to get going. But they held up long enough to get here to speak to you, to all of you across this country, to let you know what they're doing, why we march. Answer that question, to be a voice for the voiceless. Answer that question as to the knowledge that that is a human life in the womb. That is a baby. No matter what anybody says, no matter how they argue, that's human life. And we have to stand up for the least of these. Speaking of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Day this week, the least of these, all God's children, they already exist. Congressman Fortenberry is a great protector of rights, conscience rights, religious liberty, and moral law. And Congressman, you recently gave a floor speech on tolerance. Let's talk about that, because this is something young people have to make that argument to their peers. There is a lot of argument out there in our culture about tolerance and equality for this identity group and this identity group and that identity group, but who gets left out the most are the most vulnerable among us, and that's the whole population of children in their mother's womb at whatever age they are. You brought that into your floor speech, didn't you?
Well, frankly, Sheila, as I was walking down to give the speech along the rostrum, the wooded dais and on the floor of the House of Representatives where we speak, there are etched the words union, justice, liberty, peace, and in the middle, which you really can't see very well, is the word tolerance. And yet it's right there in the middle. And I tried to make the point that we are living in a very good age in which we are wrestling with fundamental issues around inclusivity and justice for all, and tolerance, even for space for people who may disagree with us. but unity around certain fundamentals, but tolerance for everyone except them, the innocent, unborn, and the women who carry them in their wombs. And I said, young people can't reconcile this contradiction. It's a paradox. It's an inconsistency that exists in our society where our law is broken, our culture is broken, and we're increasingly unhappy, and there is a meanness to the abortion industry that, again, is attacking innocent unborn life and women who carry them for profit. And young people simply don't see this as a viable option, no matter how hard the circumstances. And so they're coming forward in the name of, again, inclusivity and being respectful of diversity, saying, but this has to include everyone, even the smallest child. So, by the way, thank you for your flexibility a moment ago. That was all unplanned, so to speak. I mean, we had 4 or 5 busloads of kids, hundreds of kids coming from Nebraska. I had to drive in real quickly. I'm not in D.C. this week, but because sometimes I am to greet the kids that are coming, I wanted to make sure my Nebraska kids had a good send-off. By the way, my daughter was also on that bus.
Oh, wow, that's great. That's great.
But thanks for your willingness to be flexible and have a conversation with them. I hope you enjoyed that.
I enjoyed it very much, and this Friday's going to be like that, a very fluid show hour covering, at that point in time, it'll be what happened at the march, because certain shows throughout the day, of course, are happening while the march is happening, and they'll get live reports from it. I'm getting live reports from it as well, but from after the march itself ended, there are many other events happening, one of which is, Congressman, years ago when I was doing one of the many times I was doing the show from D.C., and you came into the studio there at the Heritage Foundation, after the show ended, we had a little bit of time to talk about what's happening on some of the big key cultural and political issues of the day and legal. And one of the things you and I talked about was the pro-life movement and the need for leadership at the highest levels to be unified and the way certainly the pro-abortion side is, and to be focused and to find, greater ways to get together. I know that after this march, there's going to be a pro-life summit, and I hope that that's very, very effective and very resourceful and creative in what comes out of it, because a lot of leaders who might run their own organizations are coming together for a summit. That's something like what you were talking about, wasn't it?
Well, you're telling me something I didn't know, but that's very good news to hear that a lot of people who have been laboring in this field, which has been somewhat fragmented, are actually coming together to think holistically about, in solidarity with one another, as to how we actually lean into this grave cultural problem that we have in the midst of this divisiveness of a nation, and maybe project a message that I think these young people are saying, what we just talked about, that tolerance also demands respect for the most innocent and the vulnerable and women. And that's very good news, because I think any movement, if you will, has to think strategically and regenerate itself constantly in order to not just remain relevant, but to represent timeless truths in a relevant manner in a way that the broader culture can hear. Remember, there is big money behind abortion. Big money behind the abortion industry. There's big Hollywood behind the abortion industry. There's a lot and big government. There's a lot of forces arrayed against this. And this is, again, what touches my heart and in many ways keeps me motivated. I think you could probably hear a little more spring in my voice, so to speak, than maybe normally when we're talking, because these young people, you heard the answers they gave. They were profound, and that was all spontaneous. And in fact, the little girl who was chewing food in front of me, I said, "Get ready, you're going on radio, okay?" She said, "Okay." And I said, "What's your name?" And I realized that I have known that family since they adopted that child, by the way, when she was a little baby. And I didn't even realize her because she's all grown up now, and then she gives a beautiful, profound answer about why she is willing to do this. And the young man as well, who was also chewing food, I said, "Nick, chew your food, quick, you're going on radio." And he gives you a beautiful answer. So their energy, the momentum that they bring forces those of us who have done this for decades to, again, regenerate and rethink strategy. We can't go stale, but the world needs us.
The world needs this more than ever before because in the past, I can remember, Congressman, it doesn't seem all that long ago, but it probably was quite a while ago, when there were those members of the Senate the Confirmation Committee, so the Senate Judiciary Committee, who would hold the confirmation hearings on nominees to the Supreme Court. And it was kind of a thing that everybody had to say, well, no, there must be no litmus test. There must be no litmus test. We're not going to do a litmus test. And they would ask questions that were clearly designed to go all around that, and it was very transparent that that's really what they were doing. That's out the window now, and they just flat out say, they want to know where a potential justice who's being potentially confirmed would stand on this. And when they talk about stare decisis, when they talked about precedent, they want precedent upheld. And it's just important to remind people the facts. Okay, well, when Roe was made into law, that broke precedent because all 50 states had their own laws on the books. So that set a new precedent, and now they say that precedent of Roe has to be upheld. Not so. Or we would still have, Dred Scott. I mean, in other words, there are times when it is overturned, when it's the right case makes it to the Supreme Court, and the justices hear it and decide so. And yet, that's how bad this is. It's all, Congressman, it seems like everything is about abortion now. Everything. Politics, law, academia, media, culture, everything.
Yes, there are 2 points. One is demanding no litmus test is actually a litmus test, so that's a contradiction in of itself. And no one in these judicial hearings ever points that out. And I'm like, want to scream at the television, because it's, again, a paradox and a contradiction. People need to be able to be free to voice their deeply held principles and how they may be handling them in the law. But yes, you've got to be prudent and navigate those hearings because they're all a bunch of traps. And it's a facade and a sham, and I think most good Americans see through that. But yes, the deep wounds in the country are manifesting themselves in many, many ways. But when someone is alone and scared and gets sent to an abortionist, is that the best we can do as a people? I mean, we should be loving enough and big enough and caring enough, and certainly we have resources enough to be able to help somebody no matter how hard the circumstances is, and not look at it as their circumstances, but our circumstances as a community, as a oneness and solidarity. And that's what we're all longing for, and yet abortion is like the litmus test for individuality, a type of, I will make my own way no matter what, and yet the damage that does is so deep and so severe. I saw a woman the other day who was carrying a sign, I regret my abortion, and I just think that's so beautiful that a lot of people are coming forward and saying, I made this choice, but telling other young people, please don't do that because it's so devastatingly harmful, obviously to the child who was aborted, but to the person who participates in that, once they maybe become more self-aware, or once they have a loving community around them and consciousness of the gravity of the woundedness to themselves in the act becomes real. So we've got to go through a healing process in this country. That's the reality. Instead of a political process, we really need to go through a healing process and stop the yelling and bickering about all this and say, listen, you cannot justify abortion as a civil right because it's completely inconsistent with science. It's inconsistent with reason. The court got this wrong a long time ago, but a new way also demands a solidarity of community so that we actually help one another. We don't stigmatize one another. We don't make people feel like they're alone or abandoned ever. We are one, and we suffer as one, and we love as one.
That is so universal. It's so Catholic in the way that it's universal. It's like Bishop Paprocki said on the show, the Catholic Church doesn't... Is that true because the Catholic Church teaches it? The Catholic Church teaches it because it's true. And what you just said is true. What you said on in your floor speech on tolerance, as you were referring to, Congressman Fortenberry, is that the young people get this, and they also can't reconcile the paradox of saying that we're going to celebrate diversity and rights for everyone except the youngest and smallest among us. us. They can't reconcile that. So you just sent them off on the buses to D.C. for the march at the end of this week, March for Life, and you say that they're going there to recognize and to stand up for true tolerance and to say to those in D.C. and across the country, please open your hearts and minds. We have to do better. We should be loving, caring, big enough and resourceful enough to care about the youngest among us no matter what the circumstances. On that point, Congressman, the young people are able to tell those who don't know, and I think there are fewer who don't know, but anyway, that there are pregnancy resource centers, pregnancy help centers, crisis pregnancy centers that far outnumber abortion clinics in this country that can help a girl or a young woman with any need she has. And just take the whole crisis pregnancy thing out of it because she's going to be embraced with every need she has. So today there is no reason a woman would have to choose or be forced into an abortion because we provide everything for free at these pregnancy help centers. Young people get that, don't they?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned this because I think labeling a crisis actually sends the wrong message that someone is alone and in a crisis. Well, let's shift the paradigm completely. Yeah, maybe something happens that was unexpected, but let's be a community together as we address the need of that person, as we address the entire need of the community. And this is the new way forward, and I think a lot of people are longing for that message. They may have a mild pro-life inclination, but maybe want to maintain some aspects of choice, probably because, again, the prospects of being alone, abandoned, or stigmatized by all of this are still real in society. But so what we have to do, again, as pro-life people, is continue to project the message, no, we're right here, no matter what. You be with us. Help us with our own scars. Help us with our own sin. Help us with our own problems. This isn't something to be regarded as crisis. This is something to be regarded as a response by a community that is committed and loving. And that's what justice means. That's the demands of justice. Not to simply have a law that says you can go do this up to this amount of a point, but to say it is the right thing to do to protect unborn life and to nurture that life all the way into the fullness of its being, all the way through a happy and productive life together in community.
Well, you say that so well, as you say everything, Congressman Fortenberry, and you said it when you said solidarity. We have to be in solidarity with each other and with those most vulnerable and most in need and most targeted and most endangered. And I've long thought we need a new solidarity movement, and I don't mean like the one in Poland. I mean a new one for our country. And you, Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, just elaborated on just what that would mean and what that would look like. I'm so glad to talk with you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Sheila.